GrokTALK.
Senator Jeanne Shaheen said, if you like your current health plan, you can keep it. That's not true, Senator. 22,000 New Hampshire citizens have been kicked off their insurance plans. Hospitals in Rochester, Concord, and Portsmouth, they aren't allowed to provide care under the exchange. Senator, you were wrong in your comments. You should apologize for your misleading remarks. I'm calling Senator Shaheen at 750-3004 and telling her I want my doctor back. You should too.
Paid for by SaberPac.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidate committee.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GrokTALK.com. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for another 30 minutes of news and opinion you could only get from GrokTALK.com.
GrokTALK.
Yeah, baby! I had to fit that in. You know, I hadn't done it in a while. Welcome back to GrokTALK, segment 4 for, let's see, September 27th. It's almost Groktober, ladies and gentlemen. Not that that actually means anything.
Well, we're going to have horror stories.
Horror stories. Well, you know, it should be after, Groktober should be after the election, because that's when the horror stories are going to start. But welcome back. We are at CNHT Studios in Concord, as always, broadcasting, live streaming on the day of broadcast, and then podcasting the entire show and segments throughout the week for your individual enjoyment.
I still wish Election Day was 2 days before April 15th.
I should move it. They should just move April 15th.
They wouldn't dare.
No, of course not. God knows, nobody would do that. Even the people who were like, "Oh, that's a great idea. I'm never going to do that." No,
It'd be like tying your shoelaces together. There's no way to do it.
I mean, town election should be like, you know, a couple days after your property tax bill shows up, you know.
Correct.
That's a little closer. You know, just a little
Here in New
closer.
Hampshire, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit closer. Not quite close enough, though. It's kind of in between, still. So, we were talking about, on the break and even earlier in the segment, talking about vote fraud, and of course it's really important for a lot of reasons. People are like, whatever, it's a big deal. But if you don't have clean elections, you can't possibly have a clue if the people you are voting for should be elected. You can't really have your own voice represented. Your town cannot know that the people it has chosen are the people that should be running your town and your state and everything. So it's so important that if you don't have a clean election, you're never really going to have clean government. And Ed's been working on this for 15 years. And
yeah, it's finally starting to turn the tide, I guess you might say.
It's a lot like trying to get some work done. 20 years, you know, EPA, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like changing a cap and rotor in your car.
Yeah. After 15 years, yeah.
15 years, it becomes very urgent.
Yes.
Overnight success after 20 years.
It builds up.
Well, recently we had the Secretary of State, Bill Gardner, become interested in voter fraud because he went for a I don't know what you call it, a confession interview with the paper in Manchester.
Said he came out of the closet.
Yeah, admitted we have some voter fraud, we have a problem. And he also admitted there's nothing he can do about it, and there was a problem with the definition of the word, I think. So that's a complete laughable joke. If you want to know about voter fraud, all you do is start with our Constitution. It's Part 1, Article 11, very first sentence. I'll make it easy. Every inhabitant shall vote in the town or ward in which they are domiciled. That's it. Pretty much, you don't need to read anything else. That's the key phrase. Domiciled and inhabitant were put in there by the founding fathers.
And what people forget is that the Constitution is the anvil upon which all law is written and or has force.
Well,
so if you write a law that does not support the Constitution on which it's supposed to be built, technically it is void.
It gets challenged and it gets thrown out. Well, in this case, our statute, the state statute regarding domicile, just repeats the Constitution. RSA 654:1. Same thing. So those words are found in Black's Law Dictionary, and that's what our Supreme Court uses. That's what the other 49 states use to define those words. Real easy. Inhabitant. An inhabitant, like they say in our Constitution, is one who's domiciled in a certain area, like a jurisdiction, for purposes of voting. Domicile is your legal home, separate from your residency, your citizenship, your abode, your place of abode. It's all the same thing. If you look up Black's Law Dictionary, it'll say Domicile is different than your residence because it's legal. That is where you would vote, where you register
Pay
your
your
car.
taxes from.
Your taxes are from. You call for jury duty. And it gets you certain privileges and obligations because that's your domicile as opposed to any other residences you might have. But in Black's Law Dictionary and descriptions of domicile will say many of the constitutions use these same phrases over and over again. So in New Hampshire, there is an effort by the Secretary of State, the Attorney General's office, and a lot of confused state legislators saying we need to change the law. We don't need to change everything. It's absolutely perfect. When it says inhabitants shall vote from their domicile, you don't get much better than that. Or Judge Lewis in Stratford County wouldn't have invented mobile domicile, which does not exist. There's different types of domicile. There's domiciles for corporations. There's domicile of origin. There's all kinds of domiciles for divorce, reasons for that. It goes back to I think the 1500s in France when they wanted to figure out where somebody's sailor was from. Domicile was used that far back. It's not, doesn't have to be changed. We need to enforce it. And one state in particular. Now remember, when you're coming from other states to vote in New Hampshire, some people come from Maryland, and at our workshop in Concord on Sunday, we chose Michelle Bensignor, who's from Maryland. Maryland uses domicile as the word of choice to decide whether or not you're a resident of that state or whether you're lawfully voting in that state. She was currently an active voter after voting here. But here's one, Wisconsin, the legal residence domicile. Just pick a state. What is the legal residence of Wisconsin for income tax purposes? Wisconsin has an income tax, which means they really have to keep track of people who live there, unlike New Hampshire doesn't have one. That's one less signature they have of yours. What is domicile? How do I know what my domicile is? They're the same things we argue about here in New Hampshire, and we can't seem to understand.
What's happened is that domicile is the new cherish.
Right. Once the Supreme Court and the activists in the state got away with saying that the word cherish means shall provide a thorough and efficient system of public schools, like other constitutions say, but ours does not. Once they got away with that, they decided, well, let's do it with voting. They got away with it recently with a police chief in New London. There was no law that strictly says a police chief can't have young ladies take their clothes off so he can photograph them instead of getting a speeding ticket. That's basically another way to look at the redefinition of domicile. When they want to break the law or take a political advantage over someone else, you just rewrite it the way you like it. But who is a legal resident of Wisconsin for income tax purposes? A legal resident of Wisconsin is a person who maintains his or her domicile in Wisconsin, whether or not she's physically present in Wisconsin or living outside the state, like a student.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so if you're a student from Wisconsin,
like
going to
say a student who pays out-of-state tuition,
correct.
Just as an example.
Yeah, and then here we go. Watch this. This is Wisconsin. It's a real state, one of the 57. What is domicile? A domicile is a person's true, fixed, permanent home where a person intends to remain permanently and indefinitely, to which he has a intention of returning whenever he is absent, often referred to as legal residence. This is pretty much what Black's Law Dictionary says. How do I know what my domicile is? This is so confusing to Bill Gardner. Your domicile depends on many things, including where you live, where you vote, where you register your vehicles.
Where you register
I
your
thought vehicles had nothing to do with your domicile. Try getting a speeding ticket in another state and see what happens. And you're in New Hampshire, they still pull your license. Where you register vehicles or where you rent property, the department may ask you to fill out a legal residence domicile questionnaire to determine your domicile. For more information, contact the Department of Revenue in the state of Wisconsin. So Wisconsin prosecutes people for voting in one town when they're living in another. And they use the same word. They use domicile. They use the same statutes we have. They use the same, evidence. Where's your driver's license? Where do you go to school? Where's your bank account? Where do your kids go to school? Where's your job? What organizations do you belong to? Are you an attorney licensed to practice law in that state but no other? Where have you lived historically?
Like
all the evidence. Like
Gregory Griffith or whatever.
Brian Gregory Griffiths, who was living with Martha Fuller Clark. Now, in that case...
That's scare quotes living, and we don't think he's ever been there. But.
The Attorney General's office investigated the people that were living with State Senator Martha Fuller Clark and voting from her home, 2008 and 2012. These are non-resident vote thieves, low-life scumbag vote thieves. and one of them's an attorney named Brian Gregory Griffiths. When the Attorney General's office investigated that, they said that here's their excuse for being able to vote in New Hampshire. Ready? They established a presence in New Hampshire. The law says you have to establish a domicile. In fact, the Constitution says you vote where you are domiciled. It doesn't say where you intend to be domiciled. It's a fact. And when you look at domiciled in Black's Law Dictionary and other states, it says, and in ours as well, in our court case, our famous court case, Neuberger versus Peterson, you have to abandon your previous domicile to have a new one. You can only have one. In the state of New York, where Michelle Bensignor is staying right now, you can't register to vote in New York State unless you've abandoned your previous domicile or where you were registered before.
So that fearless legal scholar by the name of Zandra Rice Hawkins, with the introduction of the word intent...
There's nothing to do.
But just because she says it is, shouldn't it be true? I mean, she is the head of New Hampshire
Grand State Progress.
I mean, isn't she the grand poobah of everything progressive? Isn't it always just intent that's important? Well, they intended on being here, but they didn't know that the next day after the election they were going to have the intention of working
just
for
because their tuition
Obama's
bills, their credit card bills, their
inauguration.
bank account statements, their tax forms all went to an address in Wisconsin, for example.
We got one here, Wisconsin.
It's their intent. You can't read their mind, so you can't do anything.
I can tell you their intent was to steal a vote.
Well, intent, when it comes to domicile, intent is followed by action. And it's your actions, whether they're, and you can look this up, whether they're self-serving or not, it's your actions that show your intent. It's very similar to arson. I walked into an abandoned building that was costing me a lot of money, and I had 2 gas cans and a pack of matches, and I fell down and the place caught on fire. You can't prove my intent. A lot of people have gone to jail for arson, for walking into an abandoned building with 2 gas cans and a book of matches. Whether they could prove their intent or not, the result of your actions, you're accountable for them, and your actions going there. Why did you go there with 2 cans of gas? I felt that I'd fall over to my left, so I needed something to balance me, so I got 5 gallons of gas. And once I had that, I started to lean to the right, so I got a second. I mean, that's the Xander Rice Hawkins explanation for setting a building on fire,
Yes.
I guess. And then the matches where I don't smoke, but I like to have in case anybody is smoking and they ask me for a match, I'll have one. So what you do is...
This sounding like a garage shot.
So when I catch a low-life scumbag vote thief, the first thing I want to do is make sure that when it comes to proving their intent through their actions, I have the upper hand. So when I find out that you're a low-life scumbag vote thief and you're registered in multiple states, I have the upper hand. So when you go on Google and you look at your name and low-life scumbag vote thief comes up, and anyone who's possibly going to hire you for a job, or the person who's up against you in competition for that job sees low-life scumbag vote thief from New Hampshire, call Ed Nail for details, then I have the upper hand. I remain in control of the upper hand. So far, I've not been sued by anybody. Eric Holder has gone after people. Well, he used to.
Yeah, he's
in other states for a lot less.
He's hanging up his shoes.
Yeah, he's hoping to wind up on the Supreme Court, but I don't think that's going to happen either. But anyway, I have right here something that we'll post, okay? It's from Forbes magazine. Wisconsin will tax its native wandering stars. The stickiness of domicile. You'll often see me writing and winning a state domicile change requires a lot more than just getting a new driver's license and registering to vote. So now one comes to the case of Michael Dooley before the Wisconsin State Tax Appeals Commission. It's quite possible a driver's license and voter registration card might have made all the difference in the world in his domicile case. Wisconsin was looking for just a little over $30,000 in state taxes. For the years 2001, 2002, and 2006, his case is instructive because it turns on a different element than most domicile cases. This goes on to, here's somebody very much like a low-life scumbag vote thief campaign worker who votes in multiple states. This guy was trying to avoid taxes in Wisconsin, but he kept his driver's license there. And it shows in the end, in Wisconsin, which uses domicile, the same words we use. It shows that he never really took an action to abandon his property in Wisconsin. So cough up the $30,000 or prove that you did. So what I'm saying is grab some of these low-life scumbag vote thieves and prosecute them and see what they do. I think they'll pay the fine.
We had something posted up. I don't know if it was something I put up for you or something else, and somebody was talking about what to do about the problem. And my response was, well, publicly arrest a few and put them in prison. And you would be surprising how quickly this problem will begin to go away.
Yeah.
We will be right back after this short break.
She tried to make us believe she was a fiscal conservative, but State Senator Nancy Stiles has been deceiving New Hampshire taxpayers. Like a wolf in sheep's clothing, she claimed to be one of us, pretending to blend in, but all along voting like a liberal Democrat. She voted to raise your gas tax by another 23%, taking a bigger bite out of our wallets every time we're at the pump. And oh, how she drooled at the opportunity to vote to expand Obamacare, which will result in higher taxes and longer wait times in the emergency room. And now the Senate wants to pass a bill to prevent us from criticizing Senator Stiles' vote. Call Senator Stiles at 603-918-0553 and tell her that we're on to her wolf in sheep's clothing routine. Tell her to stop pretending to be a fiscal conservative and start voting like one. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
Congress needs to end wasteful government spending, like the $787 billion of taxpayer money thrown away in the 2009 stimulus package. It may not have done you any good, but U.S. Senator Jeanne Shaheen's business interest made out to the tune of $78,000. No wonder she doesn't want to talk about it whenever the subject pops up. Call Senator Shaheen and tell her you're tired of wasteful government spending.
GrokTALK.
See, I'm talking off mic, and not about Mike, who might be listening. Mike's in Scotland. There, he went to. He did not go. He went to vote. Yeah,
No.
He did not go. Yes, he's not domiciled there.
He is changing his domicile as we speak to be a U.S. citizen.
Oh, he is?
He is trying to become naturalized the right way.
And he's been
right
here a
way.
long time, and he's
20
definitely,
years.
and he's worked, and he's paid taxes, and he's done his civic duty, and he deserves to go ahead of the millions of executive amnesty candidates that Mr. Obama's looking at. But we don't want to go off tangent there.
Well,
He's in Scotland. Hi, Mike. You're probably listening.
Hope it's not cold.
How's
So
dinner?
that's killed on.
It's pretty late there. It's afternoon there. So anyway,
Let me finish up
Please
with this. This is an
proceed.
article from Forbes magazine by a Peter J. Riley. He's a contributor. Let me see. Stickiness of domicile. Back to this very mystical word that no one can understand. Domicile is a concept that's sometimes threatened to border on the mystical, since it's ultimately about intent. But of course, that intent needs to be manifested in action. One of the fundamental works of Western literature is all about domicile. That's the Iliad and the Odyssey. The foundation works of literature is blah blah blah. There are three very important concepts in domicile. The first is that Lee Marfin's wandering star to the contrary notwithstanding, everybody has a domicile. You have to have one. Or the place you just left. Many people are tripped up by the first element. They fail to thoroughly abandon their old domiciles. They continue to own property and visit infrequently. Aggressive state auditors will consider where the burial plots are owned and even hold it against you that you continue to contribute to local charities. I understand that Massachusetts charities managed to convince the Department of Revenue that the latter was a self-defeating tactic. And apparently Wisconsin did not question whether Mr. Dudley had abandoned the state. Mr. Dudley lived in Wisconsin from birth till 1999, and then he went on a trek with various jobs to different states, and they kept his domicile because of certain actions he took. That is exactly what we should be doing here in New Hampshire. When somebody comes in and they vote here, and you find out when you send them a letter that they don't respond, or they've moved on somewhere else, or maintained their domicile in another state, like their active ability to vote in another state, you can prosecute them. So it's doable. We choose not to. In very rare situations, I think they prosecuted a young man from Milford who voted in Milford and in Keene. So he stole a vote from us. The voters we're catching are stealing a vote from our state. Basically, they're getting involved in national elections. They're doing it with intent that manifests itself in their actions. Their actions are traceable. If I can catch them on the internet, think what the Attorney General's office could do. When you get arrested, you turn over your documents. You come on into court. Show us how you're not a resident. Show us anything. Michelle Bensignor was in Unit 8/16 with Jeff Witrowski, a known vote thief. She was working for Hillary and was working for Jeanne Shaheen, as was Caitlin Ann Legaki. In 2008, she was here working for Jeanne Shaheen. That seems to be the common denominator around here, doesn't it? Former Governor Jeanne Shaheen, who vetoed photo ID 3 times, has an interest and a stake in a confusing meaning for the word domicile. So I don't think voters should take it. When someone tells you that, just tell them it's nonsense. You open up the law dictionary, there's your definition. Let's get on with prosecuting some of these vote thieves. Because I'm thinking there's between 5,000 and 8,000 in our state at any given time.
Question. Right now we've had Democrat governors for quite some time. Very few times have the Republicans held the majorities in the state and the Senate. If, for some unknown supernatural reason, the Republicans run the table, which I'm extremely doubtful because, as I showed for Scott Brown earlier, the trend for Walt Havenstein against Maggie the Red Hassan is also trending downward as far as his chances are concerned. I don't think we're going to win the House, and I think we're going to lose the Senate. But if we were to run the table, how could the Republicans, if they wanted to, and remember, this is the party of Jeb Bradley, whose son was convicted of doing just this. This is why the Republicans won't touch this topic with a 30-foot pole.
Yeah, one kid, because let's ignore the 8,000 non-residents who are voting here.
Yeah, this is
stealing elections because of one candidate's son.
Let's protect our own. What could they do to fix this problem and actually go after some of these
Clean
people?
out the Attorney General's office.
Mm-hmm.
Fire everybody who's in there except the staff.
Can the governor say to the AG, you will do this?
Well, the governor gets an opportunity to appoint the Attorney General when that time is up during their tenure. Otherwise, they might have a tenure that is beyond the reach of the new governor. But usually if a governor says, I'd really not rather have you around, that AG usually steps down and puts somebody aggressive in there and say, well, we're going to pick a few cases, and if we have to get on our knees and crawl on our belly to Ed Nail and have him hand us 6 or 8 perfect cases, then we'll prosecute a couple and we'll put it in the papers.
What if the AG decides to, I don't care, you're a weak governor, you're one of the weakest governors in the union because of the way things are written, I'm going to just stick around and stick it in your eye. What can the governor do?
I'd work on the AG's budget. I'd get to the podium and hammer on the podium and say, I'm trying to stop voter fraud in the state, which 70% of the people in the state of New Hampshire would like to see voter fraud eliminated and like to see photo ID. You work that angle. So you want to do it politically. There's no, just take the words in the dictionary and say there is no problem.
Now, ask an important question, like why does an assistant AG have a student from Canada voting in New Hampshire and they don't even live here? And they're not even from here. They're from Hawaii.
Actually working for a U.S. senator. That's the other part we see. Quite often, these low-life vote scums that come to New Hampshire come from a U.S. senator's office.
Mm-hmm. They work as interns.
Hawaiian senator, Maryland. Where this one worked for Mikulski.
Yep.
And that they're associating with Jeanne Shaheen because she's not in the meeting she's supposed to be regarding national defense. She's off somewhere else, probably meeting with Barbara Mikulski and Claire McCaskill and Kay Hagan. Maybe they're having a breakfast somewhere when she's supposed to be doing her job. But Jeanne Shaheen's notorious for not being where she's supposed to be in D.C., and she's notorious for having people who are not supposed to be voting in New Hampshire doing that.
And what does it say about our leadership, who blithely let this stuff happen?
They're not leaders. They're figureheads. We had one at the Attorney General's office. What was her name? Kelly Ayotte. She could have put her foot down and resolved this a long time ago.
Sure,
and then she took the worst offender, Bud Fitch, from the Attorney General's office, and he now works for her. That shows you how bad this is here in New Hampshire. So you know what I'm going to do? I have a background study on Bud Fitch. I don't think many people in New Hampshire know who he is or where he came from and what his background is.
So we're
going to do a little expose on Bud Fitch and see if he can take the heat.
So you can post that up in such a way that you could always say Kelly Ayotte's Bud Fitch, Kelly Ayotte's Bud Fitch, Kelly Ayotte's Bud Fitch,
and see if Bud Fitch can maybe find a way to have a conversation with Mr. Klein at the Manchester paper and do a little mea culpa.
Yeah, just keep Dan Toohey out of the way.
I'm sorry, I can't read English. Every time Mr. Nail came in with these out-of-state voters, it was like someone else was speaking through me. I don't know what happened. So Bud Fitch was one of the worst offenders at the election division, the Attorney General's office, and Kelly Kelly Ayotte takes him to under her wing when she gets elected. That shows you how bad it is. Now, what's funny is if any of these chowderheads lose by 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 votes, they've lost by out-of-state votes. I have to just belly laugh in their face. If Havenstein misses this gubernatorial race by 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 votes, that's non-residents. That's the college students and the activists that come here from out of state, or people who have left here years ago, maybe even 22 years ago, still voting in these different
or somebody else voting for them because leaving names on a voter checklist is how people commit vote fraud.
Ta-da.
It happens. We have Caitlin Legaki.
Yep,
Somebody voted for her while she was in Missouri on Election Day in front of a camera. It's on Granite Grok.
Gotcha.
She's like, it wasn't me. But it was.
Well, did you register in 2008 when you were here working for Gene Shaheen?
You didn't unregister?
Well, yeah, I did. Did you ever unregister? No.
So who voted for you?
And why were you registered when you were working for Kay Hagan? Why were you registered in North Carolina and D.C.?
Too, yeah, 3 states.
3 states and D.C. That's enough.
That
shows intent. That shows action.
I want to wind that back because my head is mulling over as much as it can. It's stuck in first gear. But your observation that if Havenstein loses by 4,000 to 5,000 people, it's due to the
out-of-state voters.
Out-of-state voters that the NHGOP won't go after because of Jed Bradley's son.
Correct.
So they're essentially sinking their own candidate.
Well, they wouldn't go after this long before his son was old enough to vote. Right. I've been at this for 15 years.
Understood, but I was told that's exactly the reason why they're not doing it now.
No, they have a long history of ignoring voter fraud.
Well, we've made a lot of noise about 2012 in particular because it was so obvious that there were non-residents in mass numbers voting, and then his name came up because people started digging. We got lots of names.
What happened was the Democrats started to dig into Republicans. We made such a hit on the Democrats, some of their key people.
Granite State Progress.
Yeah, Michelle Bensonor is a insider with the Hillary campaign.
Yep.
So when you start splashing her and Elena Biden's names all over the press, the Democrats went after the Republicans by going after individuals. We never did that. We took the list of suspected out-of-state voters and went with that.
Yeah,
we took the Obama list.
Just because those voters all led to Democrat candidates, geez, that was just a coincidence. But they went the other way around.
They went family and individual. We can still do that.
Right.
Maybe
we
should
still do that.
Well, I think we have in some cases. I mean, Emma Roos had her adult children come up from Virginia and D.C. and vote in 2012.
Yep.
They don't live here. They have jobs. He's a conductor in, like, the Philadelphia Orchestra or something like that. He votes in New Hampshire in 2012.
Shows action.
That's not where he lives.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is GrokTALK. We'd like to thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the podcast if that's how you're listening. I'm Steve McDonald here with Skip Murphy. Ed Nail, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom on domicile and residency and all those cool things. And we will be back next week with more guests, more conversations, more topics, more issues, and more GrokTALK.
Yeah, baby!
When asked whether she's still
Grok TV.